So this will be available to you, the candidates, on our Facebook page, or just get in touch with me if you can't access it. Happy to send it to you if you need it. All right, I think we're ready to go. Let me just let this person in and we'll get started. So good evening and welcome to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee Candidates Forum. My name is John Deely and I'm the chairman of the committee. So we enjoy each year this opportunity to offer the Hingham candidates for local office an opportunity to present their candidacy to the community and allow them an opportunity to outline what they hope to accomplish in the community if they're elected. So this is a bipartisan effort to both candidates of Democrat and Republican background. Before we get started, I just want to, before I turn the mic over to Megan as the moderator, I just want to make a pitch to both the candidates and the voters that are Democrats. If you like what you see we're doing tonight, check us out. We meet monthly and we engage in many community projects. In the chat, I will include the contact information for both myself and the outreach person, James Byrne. So give one of us a call and would like to, if you'd like to chat with us. And so let me just introduce tonight, our moderator is Megan Burr. Megan is the vice chair of our committee, and Megan will provide the ground rules for this evening. So Megan, take it away.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, John, for the introduction, and thank you for to the candidates for coming out tonight. I know that everyone is very busy, and these forums kind of just keep coming, and I really, really do appreciate that you've made the time for us. And of course, I'd like to thank all the people who have turned out for this forum. In his book, a sociology professor or a political science professor named J. Eric Oliver wrote that local governments in towns smaller than 100,000 people spend over $1.6 trillion every year, collect more revenue than the federal government does in income taxes. And I'd say, this is most important, and this is a direct quote, the daily decisions have a more direct impact on Americans than most laws and regulations made in Washington, D.C. Local governments tell us where we can live, how we can dress, what we can eat, and how we can act in both public and private places. Despite this, only about 15% of voters vote in local elections. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just want to say that it is so important that you are all here and involved in paying attention. And I thank you for your participation. And I hope that you have come with plenty of questions for the candidates. Our format is going to be very simple. Candidates will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will open up the floor to questions. Unlike most of the forums, you can question any candidates who are running unopposed, which I think is very important. I'm going to note that the candidates do not need to take the entire 3 minutes. It's longer than you think. And I'm going to ask that audience members keep the questions kind of as succinct as possible. Candidates will have about 60 seconds to respond. Ellen Whalen is my brave timekeeper. We sort of talked about how best to do this, like holding up a sign, but we were worried that people might not see that. So she actually has an alarm on her phone, which will play a very nice little song when your time is up. When that happens, please finish the question as soon as, or finish the answer as soon as possible. And we will move on to the next person. I'm also just going to ask that people stay on mute unless you're asking a question, just because, you know, we're all at home, there's background noise. So I'd like to start with the candidate for select board, Joe Fisher. Mr. Fisher, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, first I'll take myself off mute. Very good, thank you. So my name is Joe Fisher and I am currently the chair of the select board and I am running for re-election. And I want to begin with two thank yous. First, I'd like to thank the Hingham Democratic Town Committee for hosting this event. And second, I'd like to thank the moderator for successfully leading our annual town meeting last Saturday, April 30th. The weather was great, and as usual, Michael Puzzo was masterful. Town meeting considered and voted on 32 warrant articles. Every warrant article was reviewed by the advisory committee. It's also the case that the select board previously held public hearings on every warrant article that was presented at town meeting. I'm going to turn to what I see as the future challenges for the town and where I intend to devote my efforts. First is the budget. We need to reconcile town expenditures with revenue. Second, we need to bring to completion two major capital projects. A new school building is planned to replace Foster Elementary School that first opened 71 years ago, and a public safety facility is envisioned at the shipyard to become the new headquarters for the Hingham Police Department, which is currently based in a portion of Town Hall, and to become the new home for our firefighters who are currently based at the North Fire Station, which was built 81 years ago. Third, we must move forward with our plans for an expanded senior center. Fourth, we should continue focusing on the environmental concerns that we're all aware of, with the goal of achieving a zero sum of carbon emissions produced and taken out of the atmosphere. Fifth, I find it imperative to move forward with the Inner Harbor Coastal Resiliency Improvement Project. The town has been engaged in a multi-year effort to fortify the harbor against the increasing effects of climate change, and we need to bring that to fruition. Six, we should assure that town services and businesses are accessible to persons with disabilities. Seventh, we need to support town efforts aimed at maintaining and growing our stock of affordable housing. Eighth, we should reestablish a public swimming pool at South Shore Country Club. This initiative was approved at town meeting and will be a subject to the townwide vote on May 14th. Ninth, it's an imperative that we preserve the historic features of our town. 10th, we need to continue supporting our public library. 11th, we need to remain attentive to supporting the rights and dignities of all Hingham residents. The Select Board established a Human Rights Commission, which will be supporting efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion within the town of Hingham. And finally, my pet peeve, I want better bike paths within town. Thank you. I've reached my 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Fisher? It might be most helpful if you can use the little hand raise button, because then I think your face pops right up to the top. But if you can't figure that out, I'll be looking for raised hands. Mr. Fraser.
Yes, nice to see you tonight, Joe.
How you doing?
Good. The question I have is this MBTA zoning. If I calculate correctly, we would have to increase the size of our sewer system in the North District by almost 50% to accommodate between 1,500 and 1,800 units, however many housing units they want. And I don't know how we would plan for that. I can go on. The chairman of the MAPC said, oh, you can zone incrementally, but we can't plan incrementally.
So that's exactly the issue that the Select Board has been looking at. One of the issues we believe is that the MBTA has misclassified the town as basically a bus town, when in fact we've got 2 train stations and a ferry service, and that would significantly affect the type and location of the houses that are required. But make no mistake that the state is really looking to increase housing around commuter locations, and they're going to be pressing. If we fail to meet the state goals there, The downside is that we could lose some state funding. There's no penalty other than perhaps a loss of some state funding. But that's a great question. It is something that we are working on. The planning board is working on. The zoning board of appeals is aware of it, and we are focusing on it.
I'm just hoping you also engage the sewer and the water and
yes.
the electric.
Oh yeah, so and also we need police, we need schools. All those need to be included.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I have one.
I think Mike.
Oh.
Michael's right. Yep.
Joe, do we have to wait for the Foster School to be built before they do something about all the potholes on Downer Avenue?
That is a DPW question that I am not sure I want to venture there. If there are things that are materially impacting safety, yes, they'll be addressed. If we're talking more cosmetics, I suspect they may be pushed out.
Oh, there are a lot of really big potholes all around the Foster School.
Yep.
Okay.
I hear you.
All right. That's it.
Okay. I'm not sure I see any other hand.
I do. I see Ellen
You
Whalen.
people are switch or quick.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of this before Clark's question, but what is the difference between being a bus community and how we're classified with the ferries and the trains? And
the difference is, the primary difference is that as a bus community, we would be required to have significantly more new housing. And if the classification is changed, the demand on town resources would be much reduced. We would not need to add as much housing.
okay, thank you.
That's a great question.
Okay. Now I don't see any more.
Right.
Okay. I was wondering if I could just ask a quick question too. I don't have questions for everyone, but I just this is an issue near and dear to my heart. So Hingham's currently at our affordable housing threshold for the 40B law, but the Avalon units are only affordable for a limited time, and I think we only have about 15 more years. So what concrete steps do you think the town should be planning now to prevent us dipping below that, knowing that it is going to take probably years to build the number of units that we will need?
So, so we are well above the 10% threshold for 40B. And as you know, it's a ratio. It's affordable housing on the numerator and then the total stock and the denominator. So one of the efforts the town is making is to make sure that as the denominator increases, the number of houses in general increases, that we continue to grow and grow a greater proportion of affordable housing. So in fact, when some housing drops off, we're still safe. We are looking at other areas where there's possible growth in housing, and we are, part of what I suspect will be development agreements will be to make sure that we have increased stock of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that we will move on to our next candidate. Let's see. Sorry, I have a lot.
I think it's Michael Puzzo.
Yes, it is. I'm sorry. Okay, so next up we have Michael Puzzo, who's running for a one-year term as town moderator. He is not only the amazing public face of Hingham's fabulously run town meeting, and thank you for that. He's also responsible for a wide range of appointments in town, including the advisory committee, which takes the lead in researching and making budget recommendations to town meeting. Mr. Puzzo, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Michael Puzzo. It's a privilege to serve currently as moderator, a position I've held since 2012. Thanks to the committee for, again, sponsoring this forum. I'd like to make three basic observations about the community that we call home. and the position of town moderator. First, that Hingham's commitment to open town meetings to self-governance, where every citizen is encouraged to participate with voice and vote, is a core principle of the town. And the role of the moderator, of course, is to ensure that when we do assemble as the legislative body that is town meeting, that the meeting proceeds fairly, that the meeting proceeds efficiently, and that citizens have confidence in the course of the meeting, in the process, and the outcome. Second, beyond the more visible role of the moderator at the meeting, the moderator, as Megan has just said, shares with the select board responsibility for appointing a host of citizens to various boards and committees. For the moderator, these include the advisory committee, the personnel board, the long-range waste disposal and recycling committee, known now as Cleaner, Greener Hingham, along with members of other standing committees, the audit committee, the capital outlay committee, the community preservation committee, and others. Also on project-based committees, including the Foster School Building Committee and the Public Safety Building Committee. This is a critical component of the position and responsibility that I take most seriously. The third point I'd like to share and invite you to kind of reflect upon is that of citizen engagement, the offering of volunteer service to the town. That aspect of our community lies at the heart of what makes Hingham, Hingham. This third part, of course, is part and parcel of the first two, but it merits being called out on its own. We're blessed in Hingham with an outpouring of capable and committed citizens of the town who step up to serve the town and the community in general. And I will say that not every community is so fortunate. I hear from other moderators about their inability to get citizens to step up or to have to appoint one citizen to multiple boards. The work is interesting, it's rewarding, it's critical to the town. The select board and I will be interviewing candidates for service over the next several weeks into June. And we'd love to have a big turnout and a whole cross section of the town. One of the things I have really focused on is getting more people who have not yet served on a committee, anything you can do to drum up support, both from yourselves, fill out a talent bank form, get it before us. And in closing, I do appreciate the opportunity to serve the town, and I ask for your vote on May 14th.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Puzzo?
Hearing none.
I would just love to hear, concrete plans for trying to get more people involved. I think that that's something that, frankly, a lot of people on this call, have been trying to do. I see a lot of faces who I know really beat the come to town meeting, serve on boards drum, and it can be hard, I think, to get through to people, especially since New England town governments work a little differently from town governments in most places. There are people here who assume that somewhere we have a mayor who's paid to do things, and that's just not how we work. So do you have sort of thoughts and ideas about more educational outreach, maybe particularly to newcomers to town who might think like, oh, politics is something I would never get involved with, without necessarily understanding that this is not necessarily politics. It's more, making things run.
Community service.
Yeah, exactly.
It's community service, and it's at the core of self-governance. Some of the things that I have done, and I'm certainly not perfect on this score, are to reach out on website, town website, direct ads, public, we'll call them public service announcements, right? PSAs in the Hingham Journal, both the paper edition, the electronic version. The Hingham Anchor has been very forthcoming with space. And we send out blast emails, town website. Go to Linden Ponds, got a lot of capable people who are older, and they're talking to them about what New England town meeting is, the notion of self-governance. And then I rely on folks like you. It's a painless procedure. And I probably have said this vignette before. I had one person who said to me, Well, it's kind of a closed club, and I feel as if the same people serve again and again, and I haven't been able to serve. And I asked the person whether the voter citizen what had they sought appointment to, and then, of course, classically, they said, well, I've never have. I said, well, that's the first step. The first step is actually offering to serve. We don't go door to door, but I welcome suggestions for widening the circle. And Joe was talking about affordable housing. You go past the Cove. We have so many, 2 daughters who, one's now at Hingham Woods, one's in the shipyard. They have so many neighbors who are new to town, and but typically are new to our form of government. As I have often said, I grew up in northern New Jersey. We did have a mayor. We had a town manager, and your job was to vote. Your job was to vote for your elected representatives on the Teaneck Town Council, as opposed to you say, no, you do this yourself. You are the voter. You are the legislator. And it's exciting. It's pretty special when you look at people throughout the world unable to govern themselves because of a superior power. The fact that we have this opportunity is really a sacred trust that has been given to us, and it's up to us to do it. As I like to say, you don't go to town meeting, you are town meeting. And the more people step up, the voices are heard. Joe's commitment to a DEI kind of approach, I share. And I'll end with this. In each of the last several years, at one point I said, boy, I feel like we're at the admissions office at some Ivy League college, because we have had materially more people offer service than we had slots. And that is that's an abundance of riches, particularly when the quality of the applicant pool is so appropriate to the position, and people don't come with a big ego. They come to serve, not to, boss their fellow citizens around or have their way. And that is essential, as John was saying in the opening. The nonpartisan nature of open town meeting, the fact that you are not elected to serve a precinct or something, cannot be underestimated as part of why the community works as effectively as it does.
Thank you. That was so well said. The longest running form of pure democracy in the world. Athens only lasted 75 years, and New England town meetings have been going for 370. It's true too. Okay, well,
Michael is waving. I don't know if that's just saying, oh, Michael, I feel like Fred Rogers, right?
Hey, Michael, I was interested in several of the articles in this year's town warrant, but for medical reasons, I could not attend. But I wanted to watch it, and I tried to look through the PEG channels. Is there a reason why we don't broadcast the town meeting live on the PEG channels?
Yes. Yeah, there's been a long, I think, firmly held and wisely so, point of view that it's important to participate in the meeting. And you definitely lose something by not broadcasting it simultaneously. I think we would lose far more if people said, I'm just going to watch it on TV. And if something is of interest to me, I'll go. So it's recorded for later broadcast. It's a legislative body. To me, that is the core reason. The legislators need to be present to legislate. So I'm sorry that you were not well, and I know you participate fully in the town, but I would not find it appropriate to say, you can watch this at home real time, particularly, and if there's a major issue, you might have folks that say, well, I'll go when it matters. So it works well, and I would want to continue that tradition.
okay. Thank you very much. I don't
You're welcome.
see any other questions.
So Megan, before you move on, I just have a question, a housekeeping question. Can people see Mike in a spotlight, or they see him as a small video?
I believe you have to go to speaker view to get spotlight.
But do people have to do it themselves? I guess they must have to do it themselves now, because
Yeah.
I'm trying to put it on a spotlight, but I guess you have to do it yourself. Okay, thank you. Keep
I
going.
look better in the small window, so.
Thank you. I like your Google, your light, your Zoom light.
Well, thank you. Okay, our next race is school committee. School committee is always a popular race. And this year there are 4 people running for 3 seats. These are each 3-year terms. I am just going in the order that my list was given to me. So I'm going to start with Nancy Ness-Carenti, and then Allison Anderson, then Matthew Cosman, and then Matthew Lebreton. So Ness, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my pleasure. Hi, I'm Ness Parenti. I am currently on the school committee and I'm running for re-election. Thank you to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee for having us here today. I think it's really important to have these forums and just hear what everybody has to say. Megan, you hit the nail on the head when you introduced this. Local elections are so important. I didn't realize that until 3 or 4 years ago. I was very quiet, a national politics watcher, and then decided that I needed to get engaged. And I think it's truly important. And there are so many decisions that happen at the local level that I didn't appreciate until I ran and served on the school committee. So thank you for bringing that up. I am the product of a single mom, grew up going to the Boys and Girls Club. It was very influential for me there. I met a couple women who were very influential in my life. And it's because of them that I've always wanted to give it back and just seeing the world in a different lens. And because of my mom's struggles, I was determined not to have that happen to me. So I went to business school, graduated in 3 years, and then went to work at an accounting firm. I worked at PwC for over 15 years and loved it there. But then once I had multiple kids, I decided to stay home and became engaged in all things volunteerism. I am treasurer of many organizations. It started with the preschool, Girl Scouts, PTO, League of Women Voters, you name it. I just kind of dive in whenever I can, which is why I think the school committee made sense, because so much of what we do is about budgets and moving the schools forward through the budgets, because that's the primary decision-making tool that the school committee has. And as Joe Fisher had mentioned, the next few years are critical. He had mentioned the budget. I think we have a lot of work to do. We have made good progress. I was really honored to be appointed to the Sustainable Budget Task Force through the town and working collaboratively with the town, the select board and advisory committee members to come up with something that works for everyone in our town, because I think we all want to make sure that we are living in a community that works for everyone. So I think that work is important, and I think it needs to continue. I also think it's important that we have a new superintendent coming in. We have some new principals, and the one that I am excited about, we're worried about, is the new business director. So he's essentially the CFO of the schools, and given him the only CPA candidate and school committee member, I think it's critical to keep me on there so that we can work through going forward. Past couple of years haven't been easy for the kids and the teachers and the parents. I am very focused on the mental health crisis that's going on right now. So want to work through those issues as well. And I hope I get one of your 3 votes.
Thank you so much, Ness. Ms. Anderson, would you like to go?
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me here today. It's really wonderful to see each of you in your little square there. But I just wanted to, briefly introduce myself. I'm in this race because I strongly support public education. It is imperative for both our schools and our town that the right people are elected to help us heal from the last few years and set a powerful course to move us ahead. Our Hingham schools stand on a really strong foundation, but there's a lot of work to be done. And starting day one, if elected, I pledge to work hard to move our schools forward. I've built really strong relationships across town committees through my work on our school councils, our school strategic plan, the Cleaner Greener Hingham Town Committee, also known as the Dump Committee sometimes, and much more since moving back to Hingham in 2008. Hingham is my hometown, and I am happy to be able to live here and come back here. But I already have these established relationships, which means I don't need to spend time building trust. I can jump right into the work. I have 25 years of business experience helping entrepreneurs improve their businesses and grow their revenues. And I would approach my work on the school committee in the same way as I do with my clients, by finding opportunities for improvements and efficiency. And I'll continue to ask tough questions, just as I've been doing for years, both in business, but also my volunteer work with the town. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it needs to continue that way. I'm committed and I have the record to prove it. I'm not new to the school committee meetings, and I've done volunteer work within our schools. I've been a highly dedicated volunteer within our schools for over a decade. So to move ahead, I think our schools need three things. They need improved communications, we need a stronger sense of community, and we need a really clear course of action. We need to effectively communicate to all stakeholders what our schools need and what their needs are and why they exist. We need to paint a much clearer picture to parents and the community members to help encourage support and working together as a town to meet all of our needs. We can do this through more transparent and timely communications. And I think we need to learn from the last few years about where we have opportunities to increase our engagement with parents, but also where the lost opportunities were. In terms of community, we've heard repeatedly in the news and in our homes that both learning and mental health have taken a blow the last few years. It will take time to remedy, but I'm committed to putting our students first. In speaking with student leaders, they don't always feel like they're being put first. And so the focus has to go back to them. We need to be thinking forward to incorporate learning that meets their needs, which includes exploring vocational and other hands-on learning. We must be forward thinking about what worked for them now and in the future, and what hasn't worked. So I will advocate to continue to fund, support, and improve the visibility of our arts programs and maintain our commitment. And listen to everyone who's, who has things to say. But our commitment to top tier academics and athletics. And then finally, the clear course of action. Our Hingham schools are at a crossroads. We're onboarding a new superintendent, a business director, and multiple principals. And we're crafting a strategic plan to take our district forward. As part of my work on the strategic planning committee, I will work to build in metrics to hold us accountable. We need tangible goals that are shared with the community and with parents and reported consistently so we can assess the progress as we move forward. I will fight to ensure our schools meet the needs and the demands of all students, both now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to hold all questions until after all four candidates have spoken. Mr. Cosman, could you introduce yourself, please?
Megan, and thank you to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee and everyone who's here tonight. Just taking a step back, we're 11 days from the election. It's been a whirlwind of activity. The campaign has been fascinating, and it's been an opportunity, I think, for myself and all of the candidates to meet a lot of great people, manage spreadsheets with town signs, which I don't want to ever do again. But it's just been incredible, and I've been really, really impressed with my fellow candidates and appreciate them being a part of this. So my name is Matt Cosman. I grew up in Hingham, graduated from Hingham High School. My wife did as well. We moved back in 2007 and have 3 children in Hingham Public Schools. My son's a 6th grader at the Hingham Middle School, and I have 2 daughters in 5th and 2nd grade at Foster School. After graduating from Hingham High, I went to Colgate University and got my history degree, then worked at PwC as well for 4 years and did consulting for them and got my MBA at Kellogg, Northwestern's Business School. I've worked at Fidelity Investments for the last 15 years. 14 of those were in an internal consulting group. In the last 7 years of that tenure, I was a part of our senior leadership team. In the last year, I've transitioned into a managing director role where I'm leading managing relationships with some of our largest institutional clients. All of this work has had me looking at data and analyzing that, dealing with ambiguous situations, making strategic recommendations, and managing relationships with a variety of stakeholders, whether we agree or disagree on the approach. So why am I running for school committee? care deeply about this town, I care deeply about the schools, and I care deeply about our students, who I think we need to elevate and think about first. I think I've been very, very impressed by the current school committee in terms of their dedication, time, and effort that they've spent, certainly over the last couple of years. But I do think there's things we can do better. There's 3 areas as a school committee that I think we can improve on in terms of how we work. The first is, I think we need to have more open, robust debate as a school committee on the biggest issues. The second is, I think we need to hold our leaders more accountable. They are doing a great job in a lot of cases, but there's other opportunities that we have in front of us that we should be focused on. And finally, I think we need to work even more collaboratively with some of the other boards in town, such as Select Board and AdCom, especially as we get close to having a discussion about an override. I have 4 priorities. The first is communication. I think we need to be more, have more effective and consistent communication, both from the district level as well as the school committee. The second is the budget. There are definitely big gaps in the budget that we need to fill, but we also need to maintain and ensure that we're managing that budget responsibly and taking a look at, are there opportunities to fill those gaps with some existing things that we already have in place. Third, we need to look at learning loss and social and emotional well-being, not only just understanding that it's happened, but creating actionable plans at both the elementary and secondary level. And finally, I think we need to focus on special education. My wife and I have one child who's in special ed, and through her experiences, but also through the conversations I had with dozens and dozens of parents, we're just not doing enough here to meet the services of this population. I appreciate everyone taking the time today and looking forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, last but definitely not least, Mr. Lebreton, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Matt Lebreton. You call me Mr. Lebreton now. I feel like the old man here.
I've been doing that to everyone, and it's hard because I know pretty much all of you. So
that's great. No, thank you all for having me here. I want to congratulate all the board members who recently won their elections, or those who are going to be delegates in convention. I hope you enjoy your spring, and thank you for your leadership in town on the committee. I'm just going to give you a little background on who I am. I moved here 13 years ago with my wife, Michelle. We have 3 kids. I have my daughter is a freshman at the high school. I have another daughter who's in 6th grade at the middle school, and my son Jake is in 4th grade at the South. We moved here like so many people did for the education system, and we couldn't be happier with the fact that we live in Hingham and call Hingham home. I talk about this here and there, but this is a very different place than how I grew up. My mother had me when she was 17. My dad was a drug addict and abusive. I spent time in my life homeless. I spent time living in cars and hotels, and I never lived in the same place for more than a year until I got to college. So getting to Hingham and being a part of this community and affording me the opportunity to participate the way that the moderator spoke about earlier, and that everyone else here, that sense of volunteerism is really real for all of us. And I know we all feel that. In terms of why I'm here, and part of how I got here is through education. I put myself through Salem State College, then got a law degree at night, and now I have my own strategic consulting firm in Boston. I have a passion for education. I was going to teach, career took a different path, but I've taken that passion and put it into my activities in the community, whether it's coaching anything from t-ball to tackle football, or in my volunteer service on nonprofit boards. So for example, just a few of the boards I've been on related to kids and families and education and children. I've been a member of the Children's Trust Fund Board, which helps to work with kids who have been abused and neglected. I'm on the board of the President's Advisory Commission for the Children's Museum. And what we do there at the board level is work to bring educational opportunities to kids in rural parts of New England, who otherwise wouldn't have access to a top-notch education. I just recently came off the board of The Base, which is a nonprofit in Roxbury. Our sole mission there is to get kids to have transformational opportunities for children. They're typically children of color in and around Roxbury, Dorchester area, but help them work and get jazzed up about education, mentor those kids, and then work towards getting them academic, not athletic scholarships, so that they have a chance at an opportunity that can be generationally changing through education for their families. And I spent almost 10 years on the board of trustees at Salem State College, which is now Salem State University, which is one of the issues we debated, where we had budgets over $100 million that came partially from the state and partially funded locally in the form of student fees and tuition, and dealing with some of those big issues that would come with a budget of that size. When I look at the things on the school committee, and I've talked to everyone here, and I echo what everyone else said. You know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone on the committee. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone running. But I think the public, I think one of the things that we lacked is, or maybe lack a little bit now, is some of the engagement in a public way, a public discourse, where people work through and debate through matters so that the community can be a part of that process. I think we have some perspective. I think, you know, we've had one vote in the past 2 years that wasn't unanimous. And I don't think we need to be argumentative for argument's sake, but I do think the public would be better served with a larger amount of discourse and seeing that there's some thought going behind some of the decisions that come out. I'd also like to talk about things like the budget and, you know, setting a list of priorities. We've seen this happen in the town. I think typically Joe Fisher has talked about this, having a list of priorities that he wants to see accomplished, and we can do 1 and 2, and that might mean we can't do 3 and 4 this year. I think we'd like to see some of that. I'd like to focus on student and family quality of life issues, such as early release times, bus schedules, things like that that matter. And then I just think, you know, at some level, it comes back down to having this mutual respect that I think we all have for each other here, and bringing that into the engagement and the dialogue within our community, so that parents feel heard, teachers feel respected, and students feel cared for. So that's some of the reasons why. I know we're going to get into more of it here, but I want to thank you all for the opportunity to address you, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I will now take questions, and then each candidate will have a minute to answer. I will rotate who goes first and then go down the list so that all candidates get a chance to answer, and don't necessarily need the same candidate doesn't need to go last every time. Clark Fraser, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you all for being here. Something less mentioned are school buses. Is there any way to have safer, more efficient, i.e. less expensive, non-polluting buses with less impact on traffic? And given the MBTA situation, is there any possibility, since the buses are located right across from the MBTA station, of finding another location so that area could be used for housing?
Ms. Anderson, would you answer first?
Sure, it's a lot of questions in there. So I think first to start off, and I know right after town meeting, one of the things that came up is some of the special education vans. And now that some of the funding is being put towards that, trying to think of ways that we can look to some of these capital costs and ensure that they meet our Hingham Net Zero goals. So I do think that's really important that we're looking for cleaner ways, both with the buses and with the vans and other transportation needs, to be considering this and working towards the town overall goals. And then I think we need to look to the town a little bit in terms of the facilities and the use for that space. It's a large amount of buses. They need to be placed somewhere. And so we would need to find another appropriate location. I don't know if I can answer that question completely for you without a little bit more research on, you know, what would be an appropriate location, or if there would be a more appropriate location.
Mr. Cosman, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, so I would similarly say this is not something that I have spent a ton of time on, honestly. And so on the location, I really would echo Hallie's response. I don't know. I think it's something that I'd be happy to look into. I know there's been some work done, you know, by the school committee already to look at, you know, how can we manage school buses in a way that to you know, some of the pieces that you mentioned. And you know, I think it is important for us to be responsible stewards to the climate, and to the extent that our schools can help with that, we should be looking at it. Like I said, I have not spent enough time on this to be able to give a more substantive answer, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like this is such a good question, not necessarily because it's something you all have easy answers for right now, but it's worth thinking about. It's a great question. Mr. Lebreton?
Thank you. Yeah, I echo that. I think, Clark, that's the type of thinking and the type of thought process that I think comes with more engagement from the citizenry. I don't have much of a better answer on that particular piece, but I love the thought process of taking existing infrastructure and existing use, repurposing it, and finding ways to be better to our environment and better in our community. And one of the things that I've gone through in running for office, so I had the chance to talk to almost, now it's up to about 80 or 90 different individual people in their roles and get a real sense for what is important and what opportunities we have. And in some of the conversations I had with folks who serve in different town boards related to the environment, talked about the need for more solar panels on our schools and figuring out different ways for us to be able to use what our existing infrastructure at our schools to both help with energy costs and get down to net zero, but also to repurpose and do different things like gardens and different things that we can bring back into the community through the function we have here. So I love the train of thought, and it's something that I think we should absolutely explore. So thank you.
Ms. Correnti?
Yeah, thanks, Clark. Thanks so much for the question. Actually, I'm the chair of the Finance and Capital Subcommittee, so this is right up my alley. A few years back, the school had, they were using an outside transportation company, and the company was going to raise the fees by $1 million. And it was at that time that the school committee decided to take the transportation company in-house, which we do a great job. We've got a great transportation director, Patrick Cunningham, who lives here in Hingham, and we are able to provide bus services to our students because he is in charge of it. A lot of other communities were struggling trying to find bus drivers this year, and we didn't have that problem. We didn't miss a beat. So it's a really, we're really fortunate in that regard. But interestingly enough, given my position on the finance subcommittee, I am working currently with a gentleman here in Hingham named Brad Carr. He's a member of the Hingham Net Zero and Hingham's Energy Action Committee. And he had brought to our attention the idea of having electric options for our buses. So we have a field trip plan to go look at other communities that are currently doing this, so that when our leases expire, we can start to do that, because we know that Hingham wants to be, you know, they want to have net zero by 2040. So we are currently working through that process now. So thanks so much for the question.
Thank you, everybody, for your answers. Barbie Lynch?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee for allowing me the time to ask a question. My question is, I'll start off with Ness and have it directed to you only because you're the standing committee member right now. I'd like to know if you have any regrets from your past term, or things that you wish the school committee as a whole could have done differently. And then after your answer, I'd love to hear from the other candidates on what they think could have been done differently over the past few years to benefit not only our kids, but not only our schools, but our kids as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and I appreciate your engagement. And we've had several conversations over the past couple of years. Look, it was a global pandemic, and there was no playbook for the global pandemic. We all wish that we knew then what we know now, and I think we would make different decisions. But at the time, we were literally working around the clock trying to find different options and alternatives. And given the predicament that we were in at the time, it was just difficult. I think I wanted to get the kids back in person, but because we were a district that has run so lean for so long, we didn't have enough teachers to be able to spread them out. We physically couldn't get the kids into the high school given the 3 feet requirement. So we were trying to figure that out as well. Again, if we had the option to find different space, we could have done that given the monies that we got from the government. However, we didn't have the teaching staff to do it. So I definitely think there are things to learn. There were the mask debates and trying to figure out when to take the masks off or not, and trying to figure out what was policy, so what was in the avenue of the school committee to dictate versus the administration. And we were all just trying to figure out the best approach given the global pandemic that had fallen on our laps. So yes, I think there are things that we could have done, and for the next pandemic, God will help us. We will know different things that we can do and do it in a better way. So thanks for that question, Barbie.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, would you like to answer the second part of the question now?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Barbie, for that question, and thank you, Ness, for that answer. I think first and foremost, we need to, look back and give the school committee a huge thank you for all their work. I think they took on way more than they ever planned during the last few years, and a lot more was put on them probably than they ever expected. At the same time, one of the things that I believe could have been done differently was more sharing of data and just better and more communications. I think people were scared, and because they were scared, it caused people to be really emotional, and we all understand that. But some of it was the lack of expectations on what was going to happen and when that was causing them to be scared. And more data being shared from the administration would have really helped. I think no matter where you fell on any of the debates or the arguments, some of the divisiveness came because people just didn't know what was going to happen, and we were talking about their kids. And so we can all understand why that became, really quickly very emotional for people. Behind the scenes, that is one of the things that I was pushing for over, and Ness can attest to the fact that I was constantly reaching out to the school committee and constantly in communication with the superintendents. And one of the things that came out of that was finally having our case data rates that was published on the website and being emailed out to parents. And so there were people like myself behind the scenes that were saying, this has to happen, you need to be doing this, until it finally actually did happen. I also think that there's a lot of lessons to learn. We all hope that this never happens again, but we did learn a lot of things. We were able to get people really engaged. We were able to find new ways for people to attend school committee meetings that they're now still continuing to do with having virtual options. I think we found ways to get really creative with teaching. And I think that, we owe our teachers a credit for that, but we need to take those lessons and just ensure that we don't forget them as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cosman.
I think there's a couple things that I would say. I mean, when the pandemic started in terms of going back to school in that first year, I was wholly supportive of the plan because there really wasn't a whole lot of there was no information. The kids had not been in school, at all, right, for 5 or 6 months. There was no information. I think relatively, within a couple of months, it became clear to many that despite everyone, including the teachers' best efforts to make remote learning work, it was very difficult, to be able to be done. And so what I do wish had been done a little bit more is a little bit more creativity and pushing on certain things. Like, for instance, Wednesdays were a constant, Wednesdays originally it was cleaning day. And then soon after, within about a month, kind of everyone across the board said, cleaning is not necessary. Everyone meaning CDC, all of those. And we were sort of locked into this scenario where we couldn't figure out how to, it wasn't a space issue. The kids were in school, where we couldn't even get the kids back, every other Wednesday, just for at least 3 more hours. So I think a little bit more creativity, I think a little bit more debate, as to the point earlier. I mean, COVID, people were on all sides of things, right? They're totally, all over the board. And yet, we never had a split vote on anything. And so that was a little bit, I guess that's surprising to me, given that everyone, like I said, was kind of all over the map. And then the other thing I think over the past couple of years, and I think there's been improvements here, but more focus on the budget in terms of transparency. We gave money back a couple of years ago. Again, unprecedented time with funds coming in, but with more transparency into understanding and checks on that, I think we could have avoided that. And then this year, while we we're not going to give money back, I think it did lead to some kind of confusion at an important time with AdCom and school committee and select board coming together on the budget, in terms of when it was called out that we're currently forecasting a potential surplus. So I think a little bit more transparency around that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Lebreton.
Thank you. Excuse me. When I look back and think of what we could have done, the first thing I have to do is I have to say thank you to every educator, school committee member, student, parent, everyone that had to go through this. I'm just a dad. I happen to be a lawyer, but I'm a dad who's attacking this or approaching this situation as a volunteer with my perspective and my opinion. I'm not an education professional in the sense that I'm that Dr. Adams is, or what, and nor were the people on our school committee at the time. So I think it was a tough, challenging time, and I want to applaud everybody for doing the best they could under those scenarios. I think if I look at it, the things that I might have looked at to do a little differently, maybe a little bit more time on Zoom, meaning time in the day when I think we were at 6.5, 7 hours a day. I think other nearby towns were at 8 hours a day. I think that was more appropriate. I think things along those lines, I would have taken more of a carrot and stick approach, I think, on masking. So I think like most of us here, I think everybody here, we all appreciate the science there, and certainly I do. But we sort of did it that if each school got to X percentage, then we would apply for a waiver. I think maybe we could have said, hey, let's apply for a waiver now and encourage schools to get vaccinated. So, a little bit more of a carrot approach than the stick approach. And I think, some of the pieces that we talked about that, again, it's hindsight, but our technology didn't sync up between schools, with teachers and across the district. And, some certain classrooms would have this, others would not. Those things, it's easier to look at now and say, hey, that's what we should have done. Much harder in the moment. But I think, all in all, we have challenges facing our schools, and we had challenges facing us during the pandemic. But I'll take the challenges we have as a community and our ability to come together to work them out over just about any other community in the world. So all in all, look, nobody could come out of a global pandemic unscathed. I think, we did a pretty good job, and as a community, we rallied around each other, which I think at the end of the day was really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, I feel, are we still doing timekeeping? I haven't really been able to hear the 1 minute beeping. We might need to hold it a little bit up. I just
Okay, I just printed out a time. I have a 30-second and a time thing. I was just afraid people might not see it, but I will start holding up a 30-second warning and a time warning, because I do get the feeling that the audio alarm isn't being heard. So,
and it's hard because of course we're all here to hear the candidates, and I'm really enjoying what everybody has to say, but we also need to go to bed at some point. Thank you so much. Kate Philbin, what do you have a question?
You're muted, Kate.
You're muted.
Sorry. I have a quick question. Even though we're a blue state, can I just assume that as a school committee, you're not getting threats or questions from some parent, committee that goes on in other states? I mean, can we safely assume that this is Massachusetts and we're not dealing with some of the issues that some of these red states are dealing with? Because school committee members, that's a pretty vulnerable position in some states. So I guess Ness, maybe you're a current one, so you could answer that.
Sure. What happens in other states is happening here. It might not be as widespread or wide known, but we get emails. About different things. So critical race theory is something that has come up. We had all kinds of debate on emails about masks when that was going on. And, at times it got to be uncomfortable for some members of the school committee to receive some of those messages because they did get to be a little bit more intense. I think I've always said that I would love to meet with people and have coffee. And I think once you can get to people one-on-one and sit down and have coffee, it's a much easier format. But I just worry about the, keyboard warriors and that kind of thing happening, because it just does get a little bit tricky and emotions run hot. And I don't think people really appreciate what they're putting down on messages. So I do try to reach out to people one-on-one instead of trying to go back and forth on email. So it is happening here. We just don't see it on social media so much, but we see it behind the screens.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of ask the other candidates that, but maybe spin it a little because they haven't necessarily had the same experiences that Ness had. So there is definitely sort of a war on school committees going on right now. So for the other candidates, what do you think we can do to kind of protect the teachers and administrators? Or what do you think the school committee can do to really protect the teachers and administrators from, this level of vitriol that is coming from, honestly extremist fringe groups that are pretty well funded. And Massachusetts did sort of put a stop to that in the early 90s when similar issues were going on, but not to the extent that they are now. So teachers and administrators are protected a little bit from curricular control by the school committee. But, what do you see sort of as your place in terms of protecting teachers and administrators from that sort of outside influence and, preventing them from doing their jobs? Can I start with Mr. Lebreton?
Sure. So I think the first thing we can do is model our own behavior to our community and to the people who will be around us. And I think the four of us have come together and done that. I think what you've seen here amongst the four of us is a campaign of ideas and thoughts in a respectful interaction. So that's the first thing we can do. I think the second thing is transparency and having a more deliberate, open process around big questions and rallying around each other. I mean, look, I promise you that I won't agree with everything that every candidate on this school committee in the school committee race thinks or wants to do. But I will also promise you that I will defend them and I will stand with them if they are attacked for volunteering to try to help our community by fringe elements that want to harm us and harm our educators, our staff, our students. Look, I think, again, to me, it's modeling. I think I applaud, Ness, Matt, Allie, and the other candidates running in the other races. You haven't seen that vitriol from any candidate in this race. And I really think that's an important part of that. And I applaud you all for it. So that's I think I'll end there, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cosman?
Yeah, so it's a really important and hard question. I would echo some of what has been said. I mean, I think it's modeling, it's being clear around what expectations are for anyone who's engaging with administrators and teachers and school committee members. I think that's important. I think some of the things we talked about before, probably less with kind of fringe groups will help, but things like better communication and better transparency can help with some frustrations. Again, I think that's different, Megan, than probably what you're talking about, but I think there's something there. And I think that's all, we just kind of have to say, like, this isn't acceptable. I mean, it's not acceptable. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. I actually want to go back to the original question a little bit first, because I can tell you that I've been so surprised for what is a nonpartisan election by the questions I've got from people. And I don't know if the other candidates have had this experience, but standing out holding signs, I've had cars actually pull over to ask me questions that are more political in nature than anything the school committee ever gets into. And it's somewhat disheartening, but it is going on in our communities. People are, pulling up right alongside me and saying, can you tell me about critical race theory? Or can you talk about this? Or what are your political views? And my response is always, this is a nonpartisan election. My views don't matter, because what matters is that I'm willing to listen to all views and to everyone in our community. And that's what we need to do. And I think that's what we need to model for our students, for our children, for the other parents in our community. We can't allow that. There is no place for that in Hingham or anywhere. And we need to stand up and be very clear. We respect everyone. We respect everyone's opinions, and everybody is welcome in our community and in our schools. And that really comes from the top down too. And I hope with the new superintendent, and I believe with the new superintendent, that she will also model that for our teachers and our students.
Thank you. And Ness, do you mind if I just circle back to you and sort of ask you my version of the question too, about what we can do in the future to protect teachers and administrators from these politics?
I think it's I go back to what could we have done better. There's the conversations that we were having constantly about where we were, why we couldn't open, and we were in every single meeting, and I forget that not everybody was in every single meeting. So if we had talked about something in one meeting, somebody might not have heard that. So I can appreciate the frustration. I think trying to reach out to people one-on-one is the best thing to do. The educators, they're tired. They are worn out. We have a public education crisis on our hands. We've got teachers who are just leaving because they're done. And we need to remember that. You know, I keep telling people, it won't matter how we get back into schools and whether we take masks off if our kids are sitting in an auditorium because we can't find teachers because they had COVID in the middle of January. There's no point in trying to rush through it and get the masks off. So I just think we need to listen to one another. It's something that I really pride myself on doing. I've sat down with hundreds of parents and heard their frustrations, and I get it. So I think just that, trying to reach out one-to-one. And you know, we are doing on the school committee, we're trying to go back to in-person meetings. I think that's been helpful. And there are things that people don't necessarily understand what school committees do versus the administration. There's an education process that needs to happen when people reach out to us. We can't deal with the day-to-day. So if there are kids who are eating snack on the floor, that is not a school committee thing. I appreciate that we hold the superintendent accountable. However, the superintendent is the CEO and we are the board members, and we have to act in that capacity. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to allow 2 more school committee questions so that we can move on to some of our other races. Virginia Payne has a question, and then Leslie Whitman. So Virginia?
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. I have a question about, I'm going to go back to special education. So I've been a parent at the elementary level and at the high school now for 5 years. And so I was going through all of the difficulties with COVID that all of the children, teachers, staff were going through. I wanted to just talk a little bit about, or ask a question about, because of the lack of paras and lack of substitute teachers and things like that, I wondered what you were open to in regards to improving that situation. I know that there are several districts around Hingham that have adopted the ESP Bill of Rights, which is the Educator Support Personnel Bill of Rights that encourages a living wage for the paras. And I can personally tell you that this is a huge reason as to why paras are leaving. And because of all of the demands, especially through COVID, that we have been asked to take on, that I know that this is going to be a very, very tough issue. You know, I know that there are a lot of people that are ready to leave as well. There are very few left, but you know, they're ready to leave. And I just wondered if you were open to this Bill of Rights when the time comes up, when we you know, want to talk about the school to the school committee about that. Would you support that?
Thank you. I'm going to start with Mr. Cosman.
Yeah, so I would certainly be open to having a discussion on how do we ensure that we are giving paras the right amount of support in terms of compensation and feeling valued. And they're incredibly, you and others again, are incredibly important in the schools. And you know, I mentioned special education is something that I think we need to focus more on. And so you know, a lot of that is ensuring we have the right level of support in a variety of different ways. Some of it's the type of training that people receive, and some of it's in the staff that we have. So you know, I've heard this pretty consistently over the last several months and talking to different people that we have a big problem right now in terms of our ability to meet those needs. So I think we need to fix that. And you know, I'd be committed to having those conversations. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have a huge problem. It's so hard to hire people right now. The paras and all the teachers are just burnt out, you know, and speaking to teachers, we're having some conversations during the strategic planning process the other day about how to better not only the culture, but just the balance for teachers and paras especially. You know, it's just been so hard, and you've been asked to do so much. that was not part of your job description. And then you couple that with the current wages that you're receiving, and it's not a living wage. So I believe that we do need to find a way to work to get closer to something that is a reasonable living wage, that you could actually afford to live in the town that you teach. And that's right now, that's impossible. And that's unfair to ask. I think we also need as a town to really look for creative ways to incentivize people to come here, because we're having trouble hiring people. And so it doesn't matter what we offer if we can't get people who want to come work within our system. So I think that goes back to, again, really resetting the culture a little bit and incentivizing people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cranty?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Without a doubt, we need to support our educators, and that includes paras. You know, this is the old adage that we fund what we value. And it's why I've been working so hard on the budget these past few years. I did the geeky accountant thing when I first joined the school committee, and I read the town's financial statements and understood how the municipality all work together, which is why I'm really passionate about this issue and been kind of pounding the table about it. We were a district that I find is very lean. When we look at our data compared to our benchmark towns, we were the lowest per pupil spend. And then when you look at the teacher to student ratio, we had the highest, and we were even higher than the state average, and that needs to be fixed. And I think that's why I am a great person to be in the position, because given my CPA background, I understand how it all works together. And I was really, oh, sorry. I just saw that for the first time. Thanks, Ellen.
I just printed it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lebreton?
Sure, I've talked about this a lot. I think, I sort of have the saying, baristas, God bless them and the work they do. I need my coffee, but they make more than paras do in our schools. And I think that's a problem, right? I think we've heard the educators are burnt out, kids are burnt out, and we're gonna have a lot of issues around a lot of things dealing with kids in the classroom, whether they're learning issues, thriving issues, mental health issues. Paras are going to be incredibly, even more important than they have been in making our classrooms work for every kid in the classroom. So we've got to do everything we can. And again, I mean, it was pointed out on a budgetary basis. We've got to look at the priority, where something like paying our paras more fits on that priority list versus some of the other things we want to do. To me, I think it's something that probably needs to be higher than where it's been. We need to value those folks, because basically, you know, at the end of the day, they're a vital delivery system for education to the kids they're serving directly, and the other kids indirectly served through their means in the classroom. So I don't know specifically, you asked about the ESP Bill of Rights. I'd have to look at it a little bit more and see what the implications are for it. But it's a conversation I'm more than willing to have and more than willing to learn about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our final question for the school committee tonight is going to come from Leslie Whitman.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. So Matt Lebreton, your answer there was a good segue, talking about your priority list. And I'm curious if each of the candidates could share what's low on the priority list. Like, what are we looking at coming out of the budget if we're putting in things like higher pay for paras, which I do think is really important. And if I was running for school committee, would be at the top of mind. So I'm just curious if you guys could run down and talk about like what's low on the priority list, because we know what's high. We don't know what's low.
Thank you. Mr. Lebreton, can I start with you?
Sure. You know, I've heard talk about having 2 business managers. That may be something that's worthy of being on a priority list, but I think paying paras is probably higher on that priority list for me right now. You know, I think we have to look at holistically. One of the things that I think would be nice to know in terms of ranking the priorities are what the priorities are today. I think we know, and I supported having a fine arts director. I think that was a good priority, but what were we not doing by doing that? So I'll just point back to how the select board runs their list. You know, they had 10 priorities. The first one on it was an $1,800 voting location upgrade or improvement needed at Linden Ponds. And there was an 8 to 10 minute debate about that, right? I think from what I saw at the school committee level, at least on the public side of things, we didn't have the opportunity to have the dialogue around what the 1 through 10 are, because it wasn't afforded to us. So Look, I think it's a great question, Leslie. I mean, I think at the end of every single person here, if we had all the money in the world, we would fund every priority for our schools. We don't, and we need to know what is not going to be funded by picking other priorities. So it's a great question, and one that I think we need to dive into. And I think for the next, whoever's on the next school committee, I think this should be a key thing that's tackled in the fall when you're budget setting, is setting up that list of 10 priorities or more.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Ms. Krenti?
Hi, yeah, so I just to kind of continue on from where I was before, I think looking at the budget, we have been too lean. We have not had enough funding for the things that we have wanted. I don't think we have been doing things in an equitable way. So we talk about the fine arts director, we have an athletics director. So we needed to have a fine arts director in order to make that learning history, that learning process equitable for the students. We talk about the central office administration that we are adding on. People are critiquing how much information we have been able to give them, yet we can't get at the information because we don't have the right people in place. I've given this example many times. We have a superintendent who was pulling data out of our system to find out who was vaccinated as far as students and teachers go. When I am paying a CEO level position to run data, I know that we don't have the right people in our positions. There was the thought about, how did you not know about the $1 million that went back to the town? Well, because we have too much going on with the people that are currently in place. So if we want to be able to make good decisions, we need to have good data, and we can't have good data without good people in place. Oh, I see my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Yeah, this could take a lot longer than 60 seconds to answer, but I think the question is not so much what I would take away. It's really thinking about efficiencies and looking across the board to see, instead of taking things away, can we be smarter with what we're spending? We've been so lean and there's so many needs. So do we have the right people in the right place to do the right thing for our students? Can we move people across the board? And can we shuffle things around a little bit so that we do have people doing what they're best suited to be doing? You know, I talk about the example of the guidance counselor. I've heard from many parents and had personal experience when I've called them and said, what supports are available? And, you know, why don't we have red flags looking at children to know that we have a social emotional crisis on our hands, to know in advance and proactively be sorting through, you know, and pulling kids aside to ask if they're okay, and looking at certain markers. And the answer is we don't have the data. We don't have someone to do that. We can't do that. And we don't have enough people in place to do that. And that's not the right answer for our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Cosman?
Yep. So I think it's a fantastic question. And I don't know is the answer. I've been saying, look, I don't know if the right budget number is 59 million, 61 million, or 64 million, or, you know, somewhere in between that. I do think that's the conversation we need to be having. What are the 5 or 6 things that are lower on the priority list? Everything's important. I'm very confident that there's not, wasted money that we're, spending on things that, have no reason to be done in the schools. That's not the case. But what I haven't seen is, what are the 4 or 5 options that we could, repurpose? And the answer may be, we can't repurpose any of that or make it more efficient. I think it's a good point by Ally. We can't, and there's pros and cons associated with, that's the discussion that I think we need to have. And I would encourage the school community to do even more of that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to all of the school committee, all the people running for school committee. This is a great race and it's going to be really interesting to see. I'd like to move on to the Board of Assessors race. There are actually 2 Board of Assessors races happening. Chrissy Roberts is running as an incumbent for her 3-year term, and she could not be here tonight. There is a second race running for a 1-year term to replace someone else between Al Chambers and Randy Winters. Al, are you here to introduce yourself?
I don't think he is.
Okay. So Al could not be here. Randy, are you here? I believe. Yes, Randy
Yes, I'm
Winters.
here.
Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Randy Winters. I'm running for the Board of Assessors. I've been Hingham resident for 9 years. My wife Laura is the owner of the Hingham Anchor in town here. We have 3 young daughters, 11, 9, and 4. I've been a member of the Affordable Housing Trust for 1 year. I'm a sort of a perpetual youth soccer coach for my daughters. I didn't grow up in Hingham, but my family's actually kind of built sort of a strong branch to our family tree. My parents live in Hingham. My sister and her family live in Hingham now. I graduated from Boston College, both undergraduate and MBA. I've worked in real estate valuation and analysis for 15 years. I worked for 5 years for a real estate law firm in Washington, D.C., handling property tax appeals for owners and managers of commercial properties. And then I joined a startup in the real estate private lending world, managing valuations for a national portfolio of residential properties. In the past 3 years, I've been running my own business in the real estate private lending world, focusing on valuations and analysis of residential properties in Massachusetts. So I have a background in both property types that are relevant to our town here for assessing purposes. And then finally, I guess to speak to the moderator's point from earlier, I've been involved with youth athletics and nonprofit organizations in town for many years. But last year I was drawn to sort of a larger civic service role. And I went through the town talent bank interview process. I found a home on the Affordable Housing Trust where there's terrific work being done right now. And I'm really excited about some of the things that will be happening there in the future. And you know, I'll continue to work on that committee for the remainder of my term there. But running for the Board of Assessors specifically had a particularly strong draw for me, given my background. And we're entering such a critical evaluation year, and I just really felt compelled to offer my services in this role as well.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Winters? Okay, I guess I'd like to ask, in listening to a bunch of these different debates, and for the past few years, people have been talking about how there are sort of abatements and tax breaks for seniors and for certain people, but that it can be hard to sort of get information about those things out. Do you have any sort of concrete ideas for getting information out to the people who most need it, who frankly might be the least likely to actually go looking for it if it requires, complex internet searches or any level of red tape?
Yeah, I think, I guess there's a couple things, and I understand obviously, different people have different levels of access to certain resources. Obviously the Department of Assessors has done a great job in terms of outlining, the available exemptions that can be applied for, the abatement process, what to expect throughout the process if you are requesting an abatement. So there's plenty of information on the town's website, but I think it's probably well understood that unless you are very familiar with what the process is and what options are out there, you're probably not going to be looking straight to the website. And I kind of hate to even say this, but as a minor plug for my wife's business, but it's an incredible town resource. Hingham Anchor is, and it is continuing to grow in popularity, and having information not just about what's available in terms of abatements and exemptions for the assessment process, but for several different town organizations on just what's being done, because there are so many great volunteers. I think things like resources like that I think can be very, very beneficial in that process.
Thank you so much. Clark Fraser, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I do. Quick question. Do you believe that smaller homes and condominiums are overassessed relative to the larger and more expensive houses in Hingham right now?
I honestly couldn't say. I dig in to my own home. I'm familiar with my own home is assessed at, but I don't dive into what other homes are assessed at. I know that 5 years ago, I believe 50% of the residential homes in Hingham were reassessed. The other 50% are scheduled to be reassessed for this upcoming year. Obviously, there's a lot that has taken place in terms of a changing real estate landscape, particularly over the past couple of years. And my ultimate goal, which aligns with what the Board of Assessors is tasked to do, is finding fair value. That doesn't, that may mean some people may need a reduction. That may need some people result in increases. So I couldn't say for sure specifically to your specific properties or comparison of condos versus other homes. I'd have to look at the data and see. So I couldn't answer that specifically.
I guess, if there's a discrepancy, are you committed to fixing it?
That's exactly what the role of the Board of Assessors is tasked to do. Aside from assigning fair market values, it's reviewing abatement requests. So that's the other major task that the board is responsible for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fraser. Mr. Reardon?
Yes, Randy, Bill Reardon. Let me observe that my question comes out of ignorance, and it relates to something that you said, that we're coming up on a year where this role is going to be very important. Are you suggesting, or is it simply factual that this is a big year for a reappraisal within town? Could you give us a little bit of
the state of Massachusetts? Yeah, I'm sorry. The state of Massachusetts requires that all residential properties be reassessed at a minimum of every 10 years. So right now, as I said, the last reassessment was for 50% of the town. And this upcoming one that's scheduled for this year will be the other 50%. And the reason why I say it's such a critical year is because there has been the real estate landscape and property values have changed so dramatically over the past couple of years. And making sure that it gets done correctly is of utmost importance. I mean, we all sort of recognize that the biggest sort of revenue source the town gets is through property taxes. And, that's not to say that, we, I guess, take advantage of that situation, but it's to make sure that it's done correctly, that values are assessed in a fair and accurate representation of what the current market value is. And ultimately, that will result in whatever revenue it does for the town. But the role of the Board of Assessors specifically is simply to ensure that fair market values in the current environment are applied to properties as they go through the process.
And are we using an outside consulting firm to help us with that, or is that done internally?
Yep, it's outside consulting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Winters. Next up, we have our candidates for the Board of Health. Kirk Schultz is our incumbent and Rosemary Byrne is running against him. I'm going to start with Mr. Schultz. Would you please introduce yourself?
Mute myself. Yeah, I'm Kirk Schultz, running for re-election to the Board of Health. I've been on the board for a good number of years. So I think most people know who I am. I actually started when I was president of the Wheel River Watershed Association. That our issue was the withdrawals from the watershed. And so we went to the Board of Health in Hingham and we became part of a task force to look at the withdrawals. And from there, that turned into the Water Supply Committee. That I was on the Water Supply Committee throughout from the early 2000s until it disbanded after we bought the water company. So I've been in town government for a while. And one thing you know about me, I just attended a town meeting this past Saturday. Matter of fact, Bill Reardon sat behind me. And fortunately, Bill, he saved my hat. I left my hat in my chair and Bill took it. And so Christine Smith, I see that you're on the list of participants here. If you're listening, I have your hat. So I went back to look for my hat. I snagged yours. So you had your name in the bill. So I have it. I called you on Saturday if you haven't called me back. But anyways, so I've been to every town meeting. And I'll tell you, you get a lot done at town meeting by talking to people on the other various boards. I went to all my Board of Health meetings. We probably had close to 200. I only missed one. I was in the hospital for 10 days. And so in addition to that, the meetings that we have on the 40Bs, a couple of those, 3 of them, I went to those hearings. And so I'm engaged in the community. I care for this job. Not only do I serve on the board, I put effort into it by being principally, the writer for most of these boards and commissions that I'm on. In the state board, which I was 20 years, for the chiropractic licensing board, 20 years, in addition to a number of other. I can't see where the time is, but I'll keep talking until
I think you have about 30 seconds left.
Cool. So I look forward to answering questions when we come to that period, to tell you what I've done specifically on the board, some of the challenges we had, and some of the visions I have for moving forward. But I appreciate the opportunity to run. We're in a lovely town, great town. And, I ask for your vote coming up in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Byrne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to just start by saying thank you to everyone that's on. I know it's getting late, and thank you for listening, and thank you to the committee for hosting us as well. I'm Rosemary Byrne. I feel very lucky to have been born and raised in Hingham and to be able to raise my family here as well. I am a nurse practitioner. I have over 20 years experience in the medical field, and I'm running for a seat on the Board of Health. The majority of what the Board of Health does involves health planning, health promotion, and code enforcement. So the health planning piece, or the review and inspection and regularly permitting of septic systems and well water, is really what takes up the majority of the board's time. And it is not very glamorous, but it is crucially important to our public health because it protects and keeps pollutants out of our groundwater. And so I know that I am not a septic or Title V expert. However, in medicine, we're never done learning. So I plan to apply that skill that I have of being able to be a quick learner. I also am I'm able to adapt and to work collaboratively. So I know that the board has a wealth of knowledge in the current board members, and I plan to rely on that as well. And then the health promotion category is something I'm passionate about, and that's public health education. So in early 2020, there was a plan to increase public health education in the town. Obviously, we know what happened in early 2020, so that took a backseat, as it should have then, but now is time to kind of reignite some of those goals for increasing public health education in Hingham. We will have access to a shared epidemiologist between Cohasset, Hingham, and Hull, and I find that really fascinating to have some data about discrepancies or areas where residents in our town could really benefit from some increased public health, whether it's campaigns, using social media, using the Anchor, using Harbor Media to reach our residents and make an impact. I have two daughters. They attend Hingham Middle School and South Elementary. My family has been committed to serving the public. My mother was a physician. Her parents were physicians. My grandmother was the first woman to serve on the Wisconsin State Board of Health in 1957. And my father was president of the Hingham Community Center for several years. So I feel a sense of obligation to a town that I love. And my husband and I both feel that it's important to show our kids that we have a duty to step up and volunteer. And I humbly ask for your support in the election in just 12 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'd like to open up for questions. Lonnie Cutler.
Must be muted.
Lonnie, you might need to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I have a question for both candidates that are running for the Board of Health. I would like to preface my question before to say that unfortunately, I lost an immediate family member from the COVID virus. And I want to know what the criteria is in the town of Hingham to start masking up again, especially in the vulnerable communities such as the senior center and senior housing in the town.
Okay, I'm gonna let Mr. Schultz start this one. I'm not sure that this is actually what the Board of Health. So Mr. Schultz, could you take this question, please?
Yeah, Dr. Schultz.
Dr. Schultz, sorry.
Yeah, and so the Board of Health, what we did during COVID is we adhered to the state guideline. And that's why it worked so well, because we gave the opportunity for the school committee to go above the guideline if they felt as though they wanted to protect their employees more, which they did. We gave that opportunity also to Tom Mayo in the town hall if he wanted to have more stringent requirements within town hall for his employees, which he did. But what we did as a board is we adhered to the state guidelines. We reviewed what they were. Matter of fact, with the school committee, we looked at the DESI versus the DPH guidelines and approved, allowed both of those. And so the question is, what did we do? Let me tell you what I did. Back when COVID
You have about
started,
30 seconds left, just to let you know.
well, I did the inspections of the grocery stores for COVID, walking around through those things. The one thing I lost, I wanted to inspect and go in to look at the nursing homes to make sure the employees were wearing masks, face coverings, and they were using the proper cleaning protocols and distancing. Now, some of those battles on the board, I lost. Mainly about going into nursing homes. But the one about the grocery stores, I went and did it myself because
Please
someone
wrap up your answer.
I just did.
Thank you so much. Ms. Byrne, do you have anything to add? I know that you weren't on, but do you have any statements about masking?
Right. So I think a big piece of that is probably just education as well. So even if it's not at a point where possibly mandates need to be put in place or where the state has come out with anything, but just sort of watching the numbers and making residents aware of what is going on in the town so that they have the information to make the choice in those situations.
Thank you so much. Clark Frazier, did you have another question or is your hand up from earlier?
No, I forgot to lower my hand. It would be a
Okay.
conflict for me to ask a question at this point.
No problem. I actually have a question. I've been really interested in how interconnected the Board of Health is with so many other boards and committees. I mean, I'm sure there's some proverb I can find somewhere about if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So I think one of the most interesting things the health department has ever done, frankly, is hiring the town social worker. I believe she was hired for 10 hours a week and then very quickly started working for 20 hours a week and is just a resource to help people in town who need help with housing, with food, with finding mental health care, and not necessarily providing these things, but helping people find these things. As someone who's on the housing authority, I get calls sometimes from people who need help with housing, and having the town social worker that I can direct that person to makes me feel a lot better, because otherwise I don't really have any answers. Do you see this role sort of expanding? And also, do you think that it would be possible to collect generalized data, obviously not specific cases because everything is confidential, but sort of generalized data about, like, so many people are asking questions about housing, so many people are asking questions about domestic violence situations, and sort of taking them to other areas of town, other boards and committees to see how we can sort of proactively help people in the places where needs are. I'm going to start with Ms. Byrne.
Great, thank you. I think we're really fortunate to have a full-time or an on-staff social worker that's devoted to our town. And on the forum for the Unity Council, that came up as, that can be a great connector for, like you said, resources to do with housing, food, legal assistance. It also, we know that mental health, especially in adolescents right now, is a crisis. And so having, even though it's not the type of social worker that's actually doing clinical work, it can be a connector to resources and helping us come together and really providing support for our whole community. And I think there was another part to your question, but I forgot it and I ran out of time. So.
I'm sorry. I spoke too long, made it too complicated. But yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of interested in sort of collecting, like, the generalized data and being able to do something to help people proactively in the town, instead of just,
right,
triage.
And as long as we definitely can collect data, as long as it's de-identified.
Right.
And that the epidemiologist that we will have access to will be extremely helpful for that. And then we can really tailor the education campaigns that we want to provide to where we really need it.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Schultz?
Yep, well, two parts to your question. The first is the interconnectability that we have with other departments, because we are a permitting board, you know, and we do septic system permitting as our primary purpose. And so one of the things that I've done up and through until COVID is Thursday is my day off. So almost every Thursday I go into town hall, make my way, talk to the different boards and departments just to see what's on their radar, kind of work out some of the issues that we have within the Board of Health to see how they handle those issues or will handle those issues. And so you get a lot done. Just like I said, I got an awful lot done at town meeting this past Saturday. The second piece about the social worker, you know, we've had two so far, and we hired the social worker originally based on recommendation that I had relative to Situate. Town of Situate was the first one in the area to have a social worker, and so originally she was hired because of hoarding, and that was the principal issue. And so when we did the job description, it was built upon that, and just the limited number of hours she was working for us, she couldn't do anything. And we recognized, wow, there's an awful lot of people coming in talking about a various number of issues, and so we expanded the job description of that position and expanded the hours. And so, you know, that's something that was developed, brought on and developed under my watch. And so, you know, now if somebody has a question, they can go into the town hall or they go to the library, she's at both locations, and talk to a trained professional about the issues they have. You know, my wife's in the same space. She's a licensed social worker. And so it's quite helpful. And so we're going to continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're
Okay. I'm not sure I'm seeing other questions for the Board of Health. Does anybody else have any? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Next up, we have one candidate for the Housing Authority, Michelle Larned. I don't know if I see her on. Is she on? Okay, I don't see her on. So I am going to move on to one candidate for the Municipal Light Board, Michael Reeve. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, Megan, thank you.
Mr. Reeve, could you please tell us about yourself?
Sure, and thank you, Megan. Thank you, John, and thank you to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee this evening for the kind invitation. My name is Michael Reeve, and I am candidate for the Hingham Municipal Light Board. With my wife and two children, I've lived in Hingham for 7 years, and I'm well qualified to serve on the board. I have many years of professional experience in all phases of energy management, degrees in chemistry and environmental science, and supplemental training in electrical engineering. I have been privileged to serve on the town's Energy Action Committee as both member and the current chair, and I am a member of Hingham Net Zero, our town's grassroots climate action group. Three fundamental principles guide my candidacy: reliability, continuing the practices that enable us to keep the lights on no matter the weather, like protecting, proactively replacing worn transformers and wiring and trimming tree limbs. Affordability, continually searching for long-term contracts and other mechanisms to lock in power at the most favorable rates, keeping overhead expenses low and managing peak demand. And thirdly, sustainability, managing all the above within the bounds of our resources while steadily increasing the share of our supply portfolio coming from renewable sources. I'd like to see the light plant intensify its efforts to foster solar installations in Hingham so that we can grow sources of renewable energy right here within our town. To these principles, I add a fourth: resiliency. If one component of our grid is knocked out of commission, we need the ability to instantly shift to other resources to maintain or quickly restore power. The new proposed transmission line and substation is one example of prudent investment in both capacity and resiliency. I urge all of us to do whatever we can to help Hingham attain its goal of net zero carbon by 2040. Support the comprehensive climate action plan currently being developed for the town in alignment with the Commonwealth's roadmap. Make a carbon reduction energy efficiency plan for your household. Do the easy, simple things like more insulation and weather stripping. Replace an aging fossil fuel furnace or boiler with an electric heat pump system that efficiently heats and cools. Our town-owned electric utility is a precious resource as we navigate our increasingly complex energy future. The Light Plants Board's stewardship of this unique asset requires long-term planning, understanding of complex technical issues, and strong commitment to fiduciary responsibility. I can help board members Jack Ryan and Laura Burns to chart a steady course, extending the Light Plant's excellent record of delivering high value for ratepayers while prudently leveraging its resources to support the town's net zero goal. I'm ready for this challenge and will do my best to serve you well.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Reeve? This is really such an important board in town, and I think it's run so well. People rarely have questions because it's not something we really need to think about. You know, if I can trust anything in this world as being reliable, it's Hingham Light. But Ellen Whalen, do you have a question?
I've started hearing this term electrify Hingham, and I'm not sure if it's coming from the lighting plant or one of the other groups in town that are have been working towards that net zero goal. But what is this term electrify Hingham all about?
Electrify Hingham, that's a very good question, Ellen. What it really means is changing our behavior of the way we do business and of our daily routines to move away from fossil fuels, to look for alternative ways of fueling or electrifying our daily routines. So for example, electric vehicles is one way we can move away from gasoline and reduce our carbon footprints. If we think of cooking our stoves, we can use electric induction stoves that are 30% less energy or more energy efficient than using gas or one-to-one resistive elements to heat our kettles for our tea and coffee in the morning. To heat our homes, one of the best things we can do is move away from gas and oil and propane to electric heat pumps, which are really coming into their own. They are able to harvest free energy from either the ground source or from the air source and convert that energy into heat, either in forced air or forced hot water to keep us warm. And likewise, heat pumps can reverse in the summer to give us dehumidification and air conditioning. So in a nutshell, we're moving our energy needs away from fossil towards electricity. And as the light plant sources more and more of our energy mix from carbon-free sources, for example, wind and solar, we're able to reduce our total carbon footprints and get us towards our target, our ambitious target of 2040 being net zero as a town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Clark, did you have a question?
I'll try to make this quick because there's still important candidates here. Is it possible that Hingham Electric could front end the money to electrify parking lots around town, particularly in complexes where they don't have money, like condo complexes and other places? Otherwise, I've heard people say they won't buy an electric car unless they can plug it in overnight.
Right, that's an infrastructure question. And yes, the light plant has secured grants for installation of car chargers throughout the town. And I think those chargers are going to be going into commission before 4th of July. But absolutely, we want to encourage car chargers to be put into low income and condominium and townhomes, those areas where it's more difficult for residents to find chargers. And if we're able to do that in shopping centers and parking areas, then people can maybe charge their car once a week with a high speed, a level 3 charger. But yes, the goal, not just Hingham's, but the statewide and all 50 states, I think, is to deploy more chargers so that the new electric vehicles coming into commission are available and people are incentivized to drive them because they cost much less in fuel.
Excuse me for interrupting. We can have this discussion offline, but the discussions I've heard, people are going to run extension cords out their window to the parking lot. They don't want to go to some remote location. They want to be able to charge at home. So that's what I've heard. And so I think that would take a longer discussion than we have time for here. But there would be allowing complexes to Hingham Electric to install on their property and then get the revenue from it to pay it off.
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah.
Okay, that's all I'd say. Thank you.
That is
Thanks,
interesting.
Mark.
Thank you. That's something to look into. I think I'm interested by this. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Reeve? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Reeve, for coming. This has been a very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is for the planning board. Gordon Carr is, yes. Mr. Carr, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks very much. And made it just in time. I'm Gordon Carr. I am a lifelong resident of Hingham, 3rd generation, I guess, and also a new member of the Hingham Historical Society. And the first meeting was concurrent to this, so I've been multi-screening, waiting for my turn. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to hear the other candidates, but really appreciative of the committee holding this forum. They're really important for the candidates to be able to get their word out and introduce themselves. I benefited from these quite a bit 5 years ago when I decided to run for planning board. And the learning curve is steep on the planning board for sure. I am now still up in where the air is thin on that learning curve. And as Paul Healy has said repeatedly, that's why the terms are so long, is because you need to get up to speed on not just the planning piece, which I want to talk about briefly, but the project review, which is a lot of what we do. We do site plan review on large projects and small throughout town, really monitoring wastewater, stormwater, parking, traffic, and really primarily ensuring that neighbors and abutters interests are taken into consideration with projects, whether those are single family houses or subdivisions or commercial developments. But when I ran 5 years ago, I talked a lot about the importance of good long-term planning and how that has served Hingham so well over the decades. The result of all of that talk was that I ended up chairing the master plan committee update for the first time in 20 years, which we kicked off in late 2019. And I can see from the folks that are on this call, many of you participated in the big visioning sessions that we did, which were probably a dozen large meetings of citizens to get input and feedback. We did a couple at the schools as well. Anyway, so that was a hugely interesting and rewarding process with the 15 colleagues of mine. We ended up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 146 recommendations for the future of the town to look at over the next decade. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to doing with my next term is ensuring that gets implemented, doesn't stay on the shelf. And we have a number of other issues that are coming down the pike for us, including the housing choice and MBTA communities legislation that we'll need to deal with. We have an ADU study committee. We have a climate action plan committee. this town is kicking on all cylinders from a planning and preparation perspective. And I'm really looking forward to staying involved, staying with my colleagues, and continuing this work. How'd I do? Time-wise?
Perfect. Thank you. I think down to about a couple seconds. But thank you so much. I will open the floor for questions. Clark, do you have another question, or is your hand still up?
I thought I lowered my hand, and again, I just will repeat what I said before. It looked like the MBTA zoning would impact utilities and might require a 40% increase, for instance, sewer capacity. And I'm just baffled as how we deal with it. And will you update the master plan to reflect these required zoning, or how are you going to handle it?
Well, the master plan is a long range plan, and you build it basically with the view that you have of the world at the time, right? So the master plan in 2001, for example, was very heavily focused on Greenbush because that was in the narrative at the time. So we probably won't update it for that specifically, but we'll take up the issues of the MBTA communities and housing choice once we really have a good idea what it means, right? As you and I talked about briefly, Clark, on the field on Saturday, the draft regulations really had sort of a one size fits all for a lot of communities. And you raised one of the key kind of infrastructure questions that need to be addressed that is just different for different cities and towns. And so we've made some comments, I think, as everybody knows, and many other communities have as well. I think we'll wait to see what those regulations really look like, and then we'll take them up. My biggest issue with them right now is just simply the timing of trying to fulfill the obligations. And we're designated as a bus community, which some people strike as a little peculiar with 2 commuter rails and the busiest ferry station in the state. But under that current timeline, it gets very tight for us to prepare these zoning changes and determining the locations. So there's still miles to go on that one, but we're monitoring it very closely and looking forward to input from everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask what sort of what the town is planning to do to really encourage more affordable housing to prevent future 40B developments?
Yeah, so that was the other sort of interesting thing about the 2001 plan. I talked to some of the folks that were involved in that, and affordable housing, or housing generally, kind of wasn't on the radar screen much back then. And then flash forward, and we're under the number, and we have some the special permit developments. So we talked a lot about that over the last 18 months or so of this master plan, including funding the Affordable Housing Trust, both for projects and for preparation, and encouraging affordable housing. There's, I think, a recommendation that says we should look at, and I've seen them work and not work, and I think there may have been one in Hingham previously of inclusionary zoning of some type. If there's a large development that we can either require some affordable housing on site or elsewhere. But there's a real commitment throughout the entire committee that we need to diversify the housing stock in Hingham, both for new residents and for seniors that want to stay in town, that sort of strange term, overhoused, right? But and places for them to go. But I think, Megan, to your point, do it sort of proactively on our terms, right? And rather than be subject to a 40B proposal. I have some friends who live in Milton, and they're under the cap, and they have somewhere like 7 or 8 40B proposals right now. They're not all huge, right? They're just sort of scattered around town, but still, that's what happens if you miss that number. So that's what we're going to watch.
Dealing with it right now too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, now that we're there, we got to keep our eye on affordable housing, just because it's it's something we should be doing, right? But also because it keeps us above that number.
And the big issue with 40B is that it's not a new law. It's just that the state is just that developers only started noticing it recently. You know, it's been on the book since I think the 70s. So we
Yes.
definitely need to really, there isn't a lot of excuses for having ignored it for so long. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Carr? Okay, thank you so much.
Good. Well, you can get back to the important, interesting races rather than this.
They are all interesting and they are all important.
I'm really
You know,
grateful for the opportunity. So,
thank you
so
so
thank
much
you
for
so much.
coming and enjoy the Historical Society.
Thank you.
Okay, our next race is for the Recreation Committee, Mr. Buckley, who I don't think is here.
Right, he's not attending.
Okay. Which means I think we are actually at our last race. We are only running a little bit behind. We were hoping to be done by 9, but this is another one that is important because they are all important, and I am interested in hearing what both Kirk Schultz and Joe Kelly have to say for the Sewer Commission. Can I start with Mr. Kelly? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So hi, everybody. Thanks to the Hingham Democratic Town Committee for hosting, and thank you for all of the candidates for participating, and certainly everybody for the incredible questions that they've had so far tonight. So my name's Joe Kelly. I live here in Hingham. I am the father of 5 children from the middle school down to South Elementary, and I have little kids in diapers. And also I'm pretty active in town. I serve on the Public Safety Building Committee, which was a town meeting was a very big day for us the other day. We unanimously got that pushed through after a lot of hard work. I want to thank Michael Reeve and John Borgia and the members of Hingham Net Zero for working collaboratively with us to actually get that public safety building to be, as of right now, we're still pushing for 100%, but we're 93% green right now. So there will very little fossil fuel. So we're working to see what we can get for domestic hot water, but it's been an incredible journey on that path. What else do? I volunteer as a youth sports coach, but I'm running for the Sewer Commission because I have a lot of experience in this type of work. I have 23 years in the construction and maintenance and utility industry, and you know I am the only candidate running for Sewer Commission who actually has a license to operate a backhoe. I'm looking forward to continue to serve the town of Hingham, and I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank Dr. Kirk for his many years of service to the town, and all of the other volunteers here who do make this town run on a daily basis. This truly is a volunteer community service, like the moderator said earlier. It really is. And thank all of my volunteers that are on as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Schultz, would you like to introduce yourself again?
Yeah, Kirk Schultz, and I'm on the Sewer Commission because I was asked to come on the Sewer Commission. And the reason being, back in, I think, 2012, town meeting decided that it was going to change the way the sewer department functioned. That we would have a Sewer Commission that would look at setting the rates and just general planning, but then the DPW would run the sewer department. And so we have this hybrid model, unlike what most other towns are. And, Joe, for most, typically there aren't races for the Sewer Commission here in town, so it's unusual to have it this year. But what I expect, I'm not going to be on the Sewer Commission for a long period of time, but what I expect is to be able to get the town to a point where, and it's going to come up pretty soon, that what we're going to do for long-term planning for the governance of the Sewer Commission and get it to run efficiently. Because I'll say this, that the Sewer Commission, the way that it is currently structured, does not work. We do not have an executive director. We do not have staff. It's just the 3 of us. Now, fortunately, we got 3 smart people, but it's been hard. to be on the sewer commission. So what we need to do is what is the model going in the future here? Do we want to combine the sewer and the water board into a combined board? A lot of towns do. Well, okay, that's something we could talk about. And that is the acquisition committee's going to be speaking or talking about that, debating that this upcoming fall. So that's coming up pretty soon. Or, what I just care about is, geez, just give us a part-time executive director, and I'm hoping that, our water, well, I don't want to say, because I don't operate the water company nor its employees, but I'd love to have someone with training to be able to help us out on the sewer side, because the planning is so similar. The piping and the mechanics of it are very similar. And so to get that expertise in there, that we have someone who's trained and knowledgeable full-time working on those projects that we, the commission, believe are the best for this town, to actually get them done. Because that's not happening now. We've been working on a set of regulations and they've been posted since July. And we just had a hearing last week. We actually voted to approve the regulations, most of those. But, like I said, I was at town meeting and talked to our town attorney for about 8 minutes. Learned more in that 8 minutes on Saturday than I did throughout most of the sewer commission meetings, because we just don't have a very good functional format, that the way that we interact with our consultants or our town entities like town council. So, I'm there to make it better, because right now it's not. And I'm just on my second term. I just got there. And there are many challenges on the sewer commission. And, I think I'm a great person to get those things done, and they're going to get done soon, because we're in that format right now of looking at that governance structure. So I don't see the gal with the time card, but I know that I'm getting close, so I'll sit back and listen to some questions. All right, thank you. Questions would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? James Byrne, I think I saw your hand up before, but now I don't.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, I guess I would just I actually have a couple questions for this one, but I'd like to know more about the idea of combining the sewer commission with the water commission. Do you, what are your thoughts about that? I'm going to start with Dr. Schultz.
I try to keep in my lane. So I'm on the Board of Health. I do Board of Health stuff. I'm on the sewer commission. I do that, and they're interrelated. But the Water Acquisition Committee is charged with looking at governance structure for the Water Commission, which currently is the Board of Selectmen. I gave some recommendations on Saturday when I was at town meeting on what I thought. And you heard tonight that I know that our greatest demand is to have some type of executive director help us out, some type of staff. Because the DPW, they're doing a great job with maintaining the day-to-day. But as far as the governance, that's not for me to say. I think that most people can infer what I believe from what I've said a few minutes ago. But I think we'll all figure that out pretty soon.
That sounds fair. Mr. Kelly, do you have any thoughts about sort of the future of the sewer commission?
Yeah, I mean, I think that nothing is off the table. I mean, it's whatever is in the best interest of the town. Dr. Kirk clearly, pointed out some deficiencies that he's had over the last 8 years with working on the sewer commission. And that's why I'm running. I'm hoping to fill the gap on some of those things. There are some inequities with who the contractors are that the town hires to do a lot of this work. I don't think that necessarily shares the values of all of us here in Hingham. It was brought up at the Hingham Unity Council, and I think that that's one thing that I'd like to work on pretty immediately. And I really think that, I mean, I don't think that I'm going to only get an 8-minute window with the town attorney about important legislative changes. I mean, I was at the last sewer commission meeting. I was the only member of the public there. And there were some drastic changes that were coming that would cost homeowners in the sewer districts a substantial amount of money prior to selling their homes. You know, I think there's a major transparency issue when I'm the only member of the public there. They send people sewer bills twice a year. If you're going to make huge changes to people's you know, billing and how they live their lives, you're talking about the potential of costing somebody $50,000 replacing a sewer system to the town hookup. You know, maybe it's just clearing out some roots, but we don't know. They're putting all of this onus on homeowners prior to selling their homes. And I was the only member of the public there. I think if we're sending people bills and we're talking about making huge sweeping changes in the way people receive sewer bills, maybe we could schedule these things for twice a year. If you get 2 sewer bills a year, maybe just say, hey, twice a year, we're going to look at changing the sewer regulation in the town of Hingham. Because here's where we find some deficiencies. We have a major infiltration and inflow problem, and it needs to be addressed. It hasn't been fixed. It's been going on for a long time, and it costs people money.
Thank you. That's very interesting. This question sounds a little bit facetious, but it is genuinely not. A significant portion of town is on septic tanks and not sewer. Why should people who are on septic systems, who are not in the sewer districts, why should they sort of follow what's going on with the sewer commission and keep up with what you guys are doing? And I do think it is important that they do. I'm not, you know, I just want to hear your take on how the sewer districts, which are, you know, only a portion of town, actually really do affect the whole town. Can I start with Mr. Kelly?
Sure. So the sewer district is available to about 40% of the town of Hingham right now. And there's about 3,000 people hooked up to it. So clearly that's not the majority of the people that could access the sewer if they want to. So there's some concern there, right? There's a public perception of what the sewer district may or may not mean. The sewer commission is not a zoning regulator. It doesn't provide zoning relief. And there's concern with that. But the biggest concern that I think that we really need to be worried about is, as everybody here knows, most of this town is ledge, and a lot of it is seaside through rivers and inlets and coastal waterways. We need to protect those coastal waterways. There's been pollution issues over the years. The sewer district was created in part to clean a lot of that up. We need to protect our waterways. We need to protect the Ware River. We know that septic doesn't work on granite. Like it doesn't. And we have to protect our water source. If we pollute our water source, well, we already have a water issue in this town. The last thing we need is to be polluting our water source and creating a bigger problem, because we don't have that infrastructure in place that if we had, God forbid, some Flint, Michigan issue in the town of Hingham, we don't have a plan B at the moment where we could hook up to municipal water. And we need to be prepared, municipal water being the MWRA. We have municipal water, but we need to be able to have that plan B and know that we did not pollute our system. The aquifer is safe, it is secure, and we need to be stewards in making sure that's in place.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Schultz, what would you say?
Well, a couple things. We do have intermunicipal agreements with our neighboring towns in case there was a catastrophic event, that we would have adequate water to be able to get us through that period of time. So that's number one. Number two, septic systems are essential for Hingham. Why? Because if we take out the septic system, that means all of our water is going into pipes and just being piped out of town. We're going to dewater our watershed, and that is going to reduce the amount of water for the trees and the environment and the rivers that and the streams that Joe was talking about. So it's a balance between having enough septic systems in town with the sewer in those areas in which you have a critical need, and that typically around the harbor and the ocean, where you have the type of soils and the pollution concern. That's why the sewer systems are there. But look what happens. When you put that type of system in, you have more density. And so we have the more sprawling, South Hingham, and then we have the more dense downtown Hingham. So it's a balance. And we actually studied this back in 2004 to 2009 with the Master Comprehensive Wastewater Plan. And I chaired that for a good number of years. So that's in the, that's also in there. And as far as the regulations that Joe was talking about earlier, that's something we worked on for years and years. We didn't start just recently. We finished back in the summer, back when Clark came on. And so we had talked with staff and they wanted certain things that we could do as far as inspections. And we tried the best we could to get those things through. And so if we did have town council give us an opinion, then we would have had more of the regulations approved last Thursday, because the component of doing inspections, some of the Title V inspections, is a brilliant idea, because it will help reduce inflow and infiltration at a fraction of a cost. We just have to talk about it as a board or commission, and it's hard to do that when town council doesn't come to our meetings. And so again, it goes back to the governance issue, and that's why we just need to do a better job. But I think I covered all the questions that you had, Megan.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I don't think I see any other questions for Sewer Commission. So I think that is a wrap of all of the candidates for this evening. I want to thank the 32 people who have stayed on through this whole thing. It was really great hearing from all the candidates. I've always particularly liked this forum that the Hingham Democratic Town Committee does, because we allow anybody to ask questions of all of the candidates, not just the ones who are running in contested races. And I think that we've all learned a lot tonight, not least that everybody needs to get involved, and thank you everybody here who is involved. As I said before, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I will probably keep the Zoom room open for a little bit, just in case anybody wants to stay and chat or has any other questions, but I think that's a wrap. I want to thank John. I want to thank everybody on the Hingham Democratic Town Committee. This is a great organization. It's going to be an interesting couple of years coming up. If you are into democratic politics, I highly recommend checking us out. Our next meeting is next Thursday. We meet the second Thursday of the month at 7 on Zoom. You can reach out to me or to John and ask for more information, and we're on Facebook. We need to really roll up our sleeves and get to work, especially in light of recent news. But I don't want to make this about national news. Thank you again to all of the candidates, and I will stick around if anyone has any questions for me or for any of the candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Seriously, thank you, everyone. I think that went really well. I've
Yeah,
learned a lot.
Went very well. Good discussion. It's good discussion.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.